Performance Engineering, back again with another YouTube video. This video is going to be about our 991.2 GTS. It's going to go a little bit lower. And what we're going to do today is we're going to put some H&R lowering springs on there and mainly document the little process of how to do lowering springs on a Porsche 991.2. So these are H&R lowering springs for the GTS. Comes with the front bump stops. H&R recommend these lower GTS around the 20 to 30 mil, which is already slightly lower than a standard Carrera S. Car's already on the ramp. We've already taken some measurements, so from the floor to the base of the arch, which we've got on the front around about 70 centimeters, and then for the rear we've measured around about 71 centimeters. So we'll get the springs on, take the same measurements again and see exactly how much the H&R lowering springs is lowered it by. Right, so onto the fronts. We've got a separate video showing you how to remove center lock alloys on a Porsche. So just watch that video, familiarise yourself with how to take off the center locks before you actually start. But once the wheels are off, for the front, this is all you need. So we've got 10mm socket, 18mm socket, 17mm spanner, 10mm spanner, and we've got a 21mm strut socket. For the front, that's literally all you need. So first thing we're going to do is remove this anti-roll bar drop link, which is just by there. And in order to do so, we've got a 18mm socket on this side, and on the other side we've already got on there, we've got a 17mm spanner, which just stops the actual ball joint within the actual drop link from rotating in order to take it off. Once this part's off, we can slide it fully out of the hub assembly, and then we'll crack onto the rest. Now the drop link is out here, just place it out the way so it's not getting in contact with anything. And then all we've got then is two 10mm bolts. So we've got this little 10mm bolt just right by there. That is holding the bracket, which is for the ABS and brake lines. And then if you've got front axle lift, which is this, you need to remove the one 10mm that side, and then the other 10mm this side. And then a good thing to do is you've got this little bracket by here, so if you pop that down and then pull the line out a little bit, when these are disconnected you have enough movement in order for the strut assembly to move out of the arch. One thing I forgot to mention, when you remove this bracket, you've also got to remove this ABS sensor. So everything, you don't want to move it too much because the brake line is actually still connected to the caliper, but it should be quite free. And then also you've got the line for the front axle lift all loose now, with the two 10mm out. It's out of the bracket. This should be enough in order to take the strut from out of the arch. So onto the top. If your car's got the Porsche Active Suspension Management System, you'll have this cable running to the top of the damper. So you need to disconnect that first. And underneath here, just give it a little pull. You'll have it here. So in order to take this little clip out, just push down on the top, and then just pop it out, slide it out from here, and then you should just slowly get this part out. And I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but there's actually a number 1 by there, and on this end you won't be able to see it. No, you won't be able to see it, but on that end there's a 2. So when you put it back, just make sure the 1 and the 2 line up, because you can put them on both ways. So onto possibly the most difficult part on the front is taking the actual strut damper out of the top mount assembly. In order to do this, you're going to need one of these strut nuts, 21mm strut nut, and a 10mm socket, which will go on here. You can either put it actually through the cable like that, or you can just put it on the open end. But basically, once you just crack it off the first time, you'll need to use this side to stop the actual damper from actually rotating as you're undoing it. So, a couple more threads left on the damper and then the whole assembly will drop down. But what you can do, if you want, where are we? Is on the lower arm, that bolt right there, you can, if you want to, just jack it up a little bit, only around about 20-30mm, just so when you lower the assembly, you can control it yourself. So now the suspension is actually away from the top mount, which you can see there. There's the top of the actual suspension damper. What you can do on these, it's soft enough to do so, but if you just put your hand on here on the top of the damper and compress it, it'll come down enough in order to clear this part, and then it'll come out enough in order to clear the wing. You can put a little bit of tape around the arch part, but if you do it properly, there's no need. The spring won't touch the arch, and then you've just got to compress the actual damper down enough. It'll stay compressed and it'll slowly release, but it's enough in order for you to take out the actual arch. So, H&R spring in. A few little things to mention when you're taking the strut out is to make sure that on these lines, brake lines, the front axle lift line and these ABS lines, just make sure there's not too much tension when you're taking the strut from outside of the arch. Another thing to mention as well is the spring. On the bottom, around by where my finger is here, you have an end stop for the lower part of the spring, and then right at the top as well, roughly again where my finger is, you have another end stop. You might have to rotate the bearing within the top mount in order to get them lined up, but just make sure they're nicely buttered up on the bottom and the top part of the spring. And then same thing again on the bottom of the lower arm where the bolt was, just to jack up the suspension unit and make sure that the damper strut nut goes right through the top of the top mount and then into this part. Okay, onto the rears now. The rears are a little bit more difficult than the fronts. With the multi-link suspension, there's quite a few more components which we need to take off, but here's just an array of the tools which you need roughly. So we've got 21mm, 18mm, 16mm spanners and a 9mm spanner. A couple of extensions, a couple of pry bars, obviously there's the ratchets, and then we've got a T55, a T30. These are 13s and a couple of 16s and 18mm, and this one is 27mm. And for the rears, you're going to need a 19mm strut bolt. We're in the back of the GTS now. We folded the seats down. We thought it'd be easier to actually take this part out so you can see, but basically the rear carpet's been folded up. Best to take it from the side, and then you can see, if you look right there, you can just see where it slots behind the actual bit of trim for the line. If you just if you just pull off on the edges, you should be able to lift her out. Same on the other side, and then you'll have this bit of like polystyrene, which basically, if you look underneath here, it sits above here. So it's nothing actually like holding it in, it's not screwed in or anything. But if you take a look, see these little ridges at the bottom? They run through most of the edge. Okay, so it's just a case of prizing those off or lifting those off these parts and then pulling it out. And then, where are we? A bit fiddly under here. And then, can you see the 3 bolts? So we've got the 3 bolts there, 1, 2 and 1 at the back, and then you've also, if you've got the active suspension, again, you've also got the same as what you've got on the fronts. So just remember, when you disconnect them, you have 1 and 2 matching together. Onto the rear assembly, and now we've disconnected the 313mm box from inside the car. There's a few lot of things which you want to do first. First things first, for the headlight level sensor, little clip right here. You might be able just to lift it up, just take that out of the way. And then there's another sensor right by there. You want to disconnect that as well. And then we're going to unbolt the lower arm. Remember, from the nut side first. We're going to crack this nut first, and then we're going to do this other lower arm, and then we're going to undo the lower drop link bolt. Okay, bottom of the suspension assembly, I've already taken the one bolt out, as this one, but basically this end is an 18mm, this end is a 16mm, and then for this other lower arm we've got an 18mm this end and then a 21mm that end. And then once this lower arm has been undone, you have a, there's a light, you have a 27mm that side, and then let's see if we can get this down. Where are we? And then that side reveals a T55. Right, so last one is the anti-roll bar drop link, which is a 16mm ratchet spanner and a T30 Torx. Once that bit's all disconnected, it's just a case then of just shimmying out the actual damper. Little tip, once the drop link is out of the anti-roll bar, what you can do is just, with the other side also disconnected, so both anti-roll bars, drop links disconnected, just pull the anti-roll bar down slightly. It'll just give you a little bit more clearance when you're trying to get the strut out. So we've got one more bolt left to do, which is this upper arm. There's an 18mm. Once this is undone, we can slide this one upwards, and then the best way to take the strut out is through this way. So once this is up and this is down, obviously mind the connectors and the wires here and the brake line, but that is the easiest way to take it out, so from this way. So with the full rear strut out, you can see, similar to what we had on the front, we're going to have to use our socket nut, and this one's a 19mm, a little bit different to the front. The front was a 21, and then this is a 9mm. Again, the fronts were 10s. What you want to do for this one as well is just get yourself a set of spring compressors. Compress them just to take a little bit of the load off the spring, and then you'll find it easier to undo this, and then you won't have no big shock when the load is released. So now we've got the rear spring off the suspension damper. You've got the spring base plate, but this is able to come off. And the reason why I want to take it off, because if you see there, there's a couple of little ridges, but basically this just allows us to lower the car on the rear even further. If you leave it on that setting, there's a high possibility that when you put the wheels back on, you put the car back on the ground, the rear ride height will be fairly similar to standard. So this one's pretty loose already, so this should just slide straight up like that. Slides up, and then you see here you've got the metal C-clip. This was probably, yeah, this one's moving quite freely already, but what you want to do, if it's not, just put a bit of WD-40 and then put this on the lowest setting, so you've got the best, well, the lowest rear ride height. Right, rear suspension's back on. Best way to do it is to come from here. So basically you're going to come straight from up here underneath this line. Just be careful to watch the sensor, and the headlight level sensor. So straight through here, just to make sure that the orientation of the top mount is all right. This little indentation where the bolts actually go through, just make sure that they're all in the correct positions. It only goes on one way, and then it's just a case of putting the top arm back on, the lower arm, and this lower arm, and then last thing to do is to connect the drop links. Put the wheels back on and then see how it looks. So back inside the car, and we've got the top mount bolts back in and the active suspension cable back in on both sides. But I just thought I'd give you a quick heads up that if you ever wanted to upgrade to the DCS module, it's right here. Right, H&R springs all installed on the car. The car's back on the ground. We've done around about 30ish miles so far, so the suspension hasn't fully settled down, but it's dropped a little bit. But from what we measured from standard, we had around about 70 centimeters on the front and around about 71 on the rears. The fronts H&Rs is lower the car around about 15 mil, and on the rears around about 25 mil, which, yes, respectively they're not the same, but when we measure it out now, the car's sitting at roughly the same, so around about 68 centimeters from the floor to the base of the arch, which gives it more nice level stance. Initial impressions seem to be very good. In terms of ride quality, it doesn't feel that much difference to standard, but anyone who owns a GTS or being in one, it's quite hard car as it is standard, and that's without even turning the suspension to sport. But yeah, so far it seems pretty good. Take it outside, get some pictures, and then go from there. So here we have it outside, looking very, very, very pretty. Just look how it's sat now. Just looks brilliant. 911 is a lovely, lovely shape anyway. I think this 991.2 is the best so far. But as you can see, it sits lovely on the front and on the rears. Well, happy with how it's turned out. Yes, brilliant, happy. But for now, the car's going to go on the dyno, make a little bit of a racket, get a cool video. The whole purpose of just doing this video for you guys is just to show that changing the suspension is not too difficult. Most enthusiasts will have the right tools, and if you're patient, you should be able to do it yourself. If you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. But for now, that's this video done. Over and out.